Now we got all that important stuff out of the way, all the shit talking of other people.
Yeah, but
Just,
you can edit all this, right?
yeah, we can edit all that, of course. Yeah. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, I know. It's so good to see you. And it's been, for me, a lot of this started just because I was, it's nice to talk to other human beings, even if it is,
Right.
In three-dimensional form or two-dimensional. I'm not sure what this is, but long distance is the idea anyway.
Yeah. No, I've been doing them with a bunch of my friends, and yeah, same reason. It's like, it's so great to just connect with people.
Have you been able to do any sort of, and I'm pretty sure you're set up for like recording from home at any given point anyway, aren't you? Like to
Yeah, that's actually,
wow.
This is my studio. So yeah,
that's so great.
I've been really lucky. I've been busy.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like after a couple of months after this started, at first it was like there's nothing.
No, I
know. And then thankfully people started calling me and saying, "Hey, can you do this? Can you do that?" Because they figured everybody's home. So yeah.
I think everybody got hip to how do I make the best use of this time? And
right.
Guys like you and me sort of get, we benefit from other people's I guess just ambition. I mean, everybody has to find something to do during all this. And I think it kind of, to me, it's been really productive. I think, 2021 is going to be nuts for the amount of new music coming out. I mean,
yeah, I know.
In general. And once the touring starts, I keep saying it's going to be like, Friday night in St. Louis is going to be like, well, do I go see which of these 5 bands do I go see? Because everybody's on the road, traffic jam of music. But
yeah,
good problem to have, especially for people who love rock and roll.
Yeah, this is true.
And so speaking of St. Louis, I want to hit you with this because, did you grow up in St. Louis properly?
I grew up in St. Louis, yeah.
So you grew up in St. Louis, you had a whole adventure, and then now you're back in St. Louis.
Yeah, I lived in New York for like 20 years and then
wow.
LA for a few years and then came back to St. Louis. I actually bought the house that I grew up in.
No way.
And yeah. And I bought it when I was living in LA to be able to, my dad was sick at the time. So to be able to come and visit him and it was for sale and it was cheap. And so I figured, why not? Just
that's so cool. Wow. That's such a great, I mean, we've all entertained that. Like, I come from a small town and I'm sure it's very cheap, but I've entertained it as well, even though I wouldn't know anybody in that small town. But the fact that you actually pulled the trigger on that is really awesome.
I mean, I didn't plan on moving here. I just planned on having it to,
Of course.
And then the kids loved it. And yeah, so it was like, why not? So, and I didn't want my kids to grow up in LA, to be honest.
I often wonder that for those of us who come from, like the not LA and New York kind of worlds, it's sort of, it's a really weird thing to talk about, but it is kind of a different thing when you're like, so St. Louis versus, growing up in, and all the things that, I mean, all the dangers that are available to kids are pretty much available anywhere. Like the small town I grew up in where kids were drinking at 14 years old. Now I worry that it's meth or something terrible like that, so not to just kind of like put all the bad news on Los Angeles, like, or New York or any of these big cities, but the reality is in more, in more the old school kind of towns, you probably have
what's interesting, the friends of mine that since I lived most of my life in Manhattan in New York, most of my friends there that actually were born and raised in Manhattan are not the kids that had a lot of exposure to drugs and to drinking at an early age and at a really early age and sex and all that, all the bad stuff that kids do. Stealing cars and breaking into stores, stuff like that you do in small towns,
because we're bored.
Right. Well, I mean, and I think you're granted more freedom in a way, at your parents. It was also a time, now it's very different. But, helicopter parenting is more the norm than the exception. So it's, I don't know. It's so strange to me. I mean, because my kids are in the neighborhood where I grew up,
That's so crazy, yeah.
And, I married a girl that is from close by, that grew up a few miles away from me. Oh, we didn't know each other, but
Yeah.
but you know, it's like, I don't know. It's just, but it's weird because my kids, I was out all the time. You know, I was like,
Right.
as soon as I had a bicycle, man, I was
Yeah, just gone.
I was gone.
Yeah.
And I would be gone all day. There were no cell phones, you know, so I was out getting into trouble, and now it's just so different, you know?
It is, yeah. But even the idea of like, as a parent now, it's like the idea of like, okay, just take your bike and go. Your parents don't even know where you are until the street lights come on or whatever is your sort of time to go home.
Right. That's what it was, right?
That's just not going to happen. That's just not going to happen for this generation of kids now. It's just
yeah.
It's a weird
and
thing.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how that works. You know, my older daughter is very independent. She likes like, she can't wait to drive, and she's 15, so she can't wait to. She's got her permit now, and she's practicing. But she can't wait to get out on her own. To, she wants to move to New York. She wants to. She can't wait to go to school to. Get away from.
She's exactly the same place you and I were in a way that. I suppose growing up I remember having a conversation with Slash like once, and we were just sitting at the studio or something. I go, how far away from where we are right now did you grow up? And he goes, 20 minutes over there. I thought, what a weird perspective it is to grow up and Hollywood is like here, or Manhattan is just right here. For those of us who grow up away from that, we are kind of always, that's our goal, to get to these places, to chase our dreams and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know what your perspective is like, because it's interesting that you brought that up too, because being in Las Vegas, and I've been here 14 years now, same as you, touring, traveling, all over the world. But I come home here and I've met most of the people that I know growing up in Las Vegas, which you would assume would all be like casinos and, it's all about drugs and money and strippers. And they're really not like that. And most people, like Frank Sidoris, our guitar player, is a rock solid human being. You know what I mean? Like he's like, and all of his friends that I've all gotten to know, all raised by pit bosses, and all the Vegas cliches are all solid people. And I think you're right. People, it's those of us that go to places like Hollywood to get in trouble, and go to Las Vegas to get into trouble and stuff like that. So it doesn't necessarily say that places like Saskatoon, Canada, or or St. Louis, it's like we grew up in these small towns, and we're often more, it's sometimes that a lot of free time creates this sort of ability to kind of get up to no good. And then we're the guys that go to Hollywood and raise hell, I suppose. Which I think, we've all seen that. But so what was the scene like growing up in St. Louis? How old were you by the time you left St. Louis? So you had your whole musical young journey would have been there.
22 maybe.
Okay, so
so I was playing in bands when I was 15, and luckily in St. Louis there were underage clubs, so we were able to go see like I saw so many great concerts before that had underage sections.
That's so
especially
great.
especially in the punk rock scene, so which is sort of what I grew up in. But I was out playing clubs at 15, and my band ended up, we would push out further and further, play college towns. So we'd play Columbia, Missouri, we'd play Springfield, Missouri, Springfield, Illinois, we'd play Indianapolis, we'd play, because it was all Kansas City. It was all 6 hours,
Now, is this all kids crammed into a van or whatever and sleeping on people's floors and stuff like that? Or
absolutely.
The whole thing? Yeah. I mean, we all had to do that. That's And the funny thing about it is, I don't know about you, but I saw so many talented guys just kind of fall off during that period where it was kind of like, this isn't cool. Like, I don't want to, they would go home and dad would have some great company and they would just go get a job and become a real person, because it's not for everybody, that pirate lifestyle.
No, that's true. And, my band ended up getting signed to Atlantic, and
that's right.
And then we toured with the Furs, and then I joined the Furs.
So how did that, I want to, before you jump ahead on that, because I'm always fascinated by your Love Spit Love Furs period. So I'm assuming you're touring with the Psychedelic Furs, and I'm assuming Richard must just have loved your playing and decided.
Yeah, I mean, I got along really well with those guys, and they had asked me to come up, and they found out I played violin and cello, asked me to come up and sit in with them every night. So after we'd finish our set, I'd go up and play with them.
So wait a second. So you started on that stuff? On like real grown-up instruments?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's crazy. You still get around on that stuff?
I'm doing a lot of that stuff now.
Really cool. Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
orchestrating
so cool.
and doing, I just did this really cool project with the Mission UK.
Cool.
And
Wow.
did all the string arrangements. It was really fun.
That's so cool. So then you, in essence, you can read music, I assume?
Yeah.
That's what's always fascinating to me whenever I watch my, we used to know Jared, who played on SNL and stuff like that. And I'm watching and I go, wouldn't this be a great gig to do? And then I'm watching them play and I see turning the page and playing. I'm like, oh, well, I'm unqualified immediately. I was from the punk rock school of like, we could barely play, but we're going to go, we know these 3 chords, let's just go play. So that's what was always deceiving about watching you come up, was it was always like, you were kind of playing in that world, but within that Psych Furs world and all that kind of stuff, the guitar playing is really atmospheric and really, it's not just, which is really interesting to me because you have that sort of punk rock ethic, but your technical ability is more than obvious. And
well, when I was younger, so I switched from, I started playing guitar, I guess, when I was about 12, 13, and was really into old music, old rock and roll.
Sure,
like Stones and Bowie and Genesis and Yes, stuff that was like before that time.
Yeah.
When I was that age, when stuff like Motley Crue and Poison and Ozzy Osbourne and stuff were popular, I wasn't into that. But I liked older rock and roll. I liked T-Rex. I liked Bowie. I liked,
all of which requires. Requires skill. When you talk about Yes and Genesis, that's not just generic.
Right. And from there, I got into all the jazz, the fusion stuff, right? So Mahavishnu Orchestra and Jeff Beck, what Jeff Beck was doing, like that's where I really cut my teeth as far as learning to play.
Right.
And then was, putting bands together to play that type of stuff in our basement because, no one's going to pay to hear that. And especially a bunch of little kids playing it. But so I had this technical ability. And then when I was about 15, I heard the Clash, 14, 15, and then everything changed.
Like a lot of
and us, then it was like, it was about not being able to play, so learning, sort of shunning the technical aspect and really, but keeping elements of it. Cause like the Police, like Andy Summers was a very competent guitar player, but you know what I mean? Like, and that's the aesthetic where I was coming from, like trying to.
But it's interesting because it brings up a good point about vocalists and guitar players and a lot of things where you have this stuff in your pocket, you know what I mean? But you don't necessarily need to go out and do it all the time, So it's kind of like being and finding things that are attitude based, like all that kind of music you just brought up, bands like the Clash, and you just realize that the emotional impact of it isn't about the technical ability of it. And we all found that in the Ramones and Kiss and Cheap Trick and all that kind of stuff, where it wasn't difficult to learn those songs, but it still was saying a lot within a 3-chord, construct. You know what I mean?
Right.
So when guys like you, it was interesting watching you in your early days in Guns. It was always like, watching you do your thing was always like, when Richard lets loose, you watch, because it's like, because within a 3-guitar construct, it was kind of like, when you would throw down, it would be like, that's the guy, because I think people assumed you were kind of like the Johnny Thundersy kind of guy over there, because you always looked bitchin' and you always had a killer guitar on, and we were always like,
well, that was sort of the role that I came into. Now, the first time I got the call with Guns was for actually
Bumblefoot position or something, wasn't it?
Well, it was, that time it was
or Robin.
Well, no, Robin was there. They hadn't found Bucket yet. So they called me in New York and said, hey, would you be interested in auditioning? And I didn't hear back. And then I ended up, we talked for a while back and forth. And then I said, I'm going to be out there in a couple of weeks to do a record, because I was doing a lot of sessions at the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to be out there to do a record in a couple of weeks. Maybe we could do it. And he, perfect. We'll do it then. And then right before I was leaving, I was calling management and they weren't calling me back. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's not happening. So I get to the session and Tommy and Josh were on the session. Thomas Stinson and Josh Freese and I was like, man, this is crazy. I was supposed to come audition for you guys. And they were like, oh, well, Axl found this guy, Buckethead. And we called off all the auditions. Right. So, had I been in that role, I would have,
it's,
been wearing a mask and a bucket.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, God bless Buckethead, because I mean, it really, that school of guitar playing, speaking of like that jazz fusion and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I understand this, at the time when you're a Guns fan and you're like, what is this? Like you're watching it kind of grow into this next chapter, and Buckethead's up there. And I was always aware of who Buckethead was already, from that
from
guitar.
Praxis.
Yeah, exactly. And that whole guitar nerd world that, I'm not really a guitar nerd technically. I'm a guitar nerd in following actually like guitars. I love like the design of guitars and the whole thing. So I always pay a lot of attention to those guys. So watching Buckethead do his thing, I can imagine Axl just going, yeah, I gotta have this guy. Even if it's for like 10 minutes, I gotta have this guy. It's just so nuts.
Bucket is very musical.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think a lot of guys like that are just, guys like Sean Lane, like that phenomenal, prodigious talent that just
totally,
they're not necessarily
for everybody
members,
right? Okay.
Well, I mean, I think Bucket's music is great. I mean, what he does on his own is out there,
Yeah.
But he did understand like how to make three guitars work, and that's a very difficult thing. And he would lay out and just stand there and be weird and buckety, and then he would come in on the choruses and it would be huge.
Yeah,
he got that. He understood that, and a phenomenal talent. But the thing is socially, I think that those guys like Bucket spend so much time in their bedroom practicing that they don't really it's just different for them socially. I don't know, and being in a band is being able to, you got to relate to people. You've got to have that, and that's I think Bucket struggled with that. I always got along with him, but I think he really had a tough time with that. Same with Ron Thal. He had a difficult time.
Did he?
Sort of assimilating that into that band world, because he hadn't done it before,
But it's interesting because like you say, when guys like you and me were kids and we were like, let's get the 4 guys together, 5 guys, whatever it is, and go play shows. Those guys were in their basement or in their bedroom and play guitar, and they didn't really think about the idea of putting a band together and having a name and what we're going to wear and all that kind of stuff and that kind of shit until later on. They were really kind of in the lab, kind of experimenting.
But really, I mean, when you think about how much of, and this gets overlooked a lot, but when you think about that time that you spent rehearsing with other people, playing on stage with other people, traveling in a van, sleeping on floors with people, that teaches you how to be married to 4 other people, right?
100%.
So, I mean, it really is it's a skill that you learn. It's a skill set that you have to develop, or it doesn't work. You gotta be a team player. But you've also got to be driven and motivated and
ambitious.
And
that's the thing but not to cut you off, but I've talked about this a million times on how like you can be the best guitar player on the planet, but if you can't hang, you're going to be hanging by yourself, So we'll often acquiesce to the guy this guy's not quite as good as that guy, but he's a good hang. You know what I mean? Not in all cases, but I mean like it's just being able, like you say, being able to live in each other's pocket is challenging. It's challenging enough to live with one person. I mean, everybody's had like relationships come and go in their life. So when you imagine like yourself having been you've been the longest tenured member of Guns N' Roses besides Dizzy and Axl, so that says a lot about your hang and your ability. I mean, it's not just like, well, Richard's a good hang. It's like, I mean, obviously you're more than skilled to be there.
I think that knowing how to, I think that genuine love, that obsession with music, that really connects you to other people, right?
It does.
it's that, you know, kids ask me, you know, what can I do to further my career? It's like, you know, if you're looking at this as a business model and how it doesn't work.
No.
You've got to love what you do so much. Like, you don't have a choice, right?
No.
I mean, I didn't have a choice when I was like, it was all I knew and was all I wanted to do. And I was going to do that until I couldn't do it anymore, you know,
Exactly.
and then I'd figure out something else.
And that goes back to what I was saying before, when, you know, like guys like you and me, I only connect myself to you in that I just didn't have another plan. I had found it I still feel very fortunate to be 14 or 15 or however old I was, playing and just realizing this is what I want to do. You know what I mean? And I think that when, you know, other guys kind of fell off and they were way more talented than me. A lot of them were really talented people who just decided, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get a family and all that kind of stuff. And like you say, when parents come to me, what advice can you give to my son? I go, there's really no advice I give your son or your daughter, because they're either going to be in it or they're not, you know what I mean? And they're going to either, like, you know, because if you would have sat here and told me, you know, like if future me had kind of been able to go back, it's going to be crazy. There's going to be crazy ups and crazy downs. And there's going to be periods of, like, I think I still would have been like, bring it on. You know what I mean? Like, I think I would have been, none of it would have fazed me. Like, all the negatives that go along with this, the record company's going to do this and the, you know, all that kind of stuff. You're like, sounds good to me.
But there's also that thing of, and I think this is inherent in all musicians, that you think, yeah, but I'm different. I know, but I'm going to be smarter, or I'm going to, but you don't understand my talent, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And you sort of have to have that to walk on stage, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, you have to have that confidence and that inner thing that makes you that you know what, I got this. You know, I'm
I would imagine it's the same. I mean, it's not the same, but it is a similar ability to say to yourself, I'm going to step into the ring with Mike Tyson and I'm going to win. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. What are you, crazy? You know, it's like, I mean, we're not really physically in danger of being hurt doing this, but you sure are emotionally and you know, any number of your ego is constantly in check when you play music. And when you live in this world, you're like, you know, I've always found that every great things come with some sort of balance to kind of, you know, sort you out. Don't get too ahead of yourself. And I'm glad, I don't know about you, I'm glad I wasn't 23 and handed the keys to the kingdom. Here's your gazillion-dollar check. Here's all, you know, just go crazy, like, you know, Justin Bieber or something like that. I go, no, I'm glad it's kind of.
Or Slash and Axl, right?
Slash and Axl, yeah. And Duff.
Imagine that. Imagine.
I mean, the fact that I was kind of, I did one of these with Duff not that long ago. Duff and Slash speak so highly of you, just as a human and as a player, and I think that it says a lot. But it's really interesting because you know, the fact that all 5 of the original guys are still alive. You know, no one lived harder. I mean, all these bands and groups that come up now and they're going to try and boast about how hard they live. It's never going to compare to what those guys did in the original wave. And between Slash, Duff, and Steven, the fact that they went through such crazy, you know, health stuff that was like, you know, touch and go, they're all still here and they're stronger than ever and better musicians than ever. It says a lot. It says a lot to me that, you know, again, that no one has a backup plan. Well, I suppose Duff is the best example of somebody who could step out of this and be just fine. You know?
He could.
But I mean, like, but that's, I mean, I'm talking about like mentally, he would find a way to kind of turn himself. Slash is 100% wired as a guitar player. He's always going to play in music. That's just who he is. And he's better today than he was when we were kids. You know what I mean? Like, he's always growing. It's pretty mind blowing. You know, I didn't mean to jump this far ahead this quickly because I have so much affection for your Psych Furs period and all that kind of stuff. Because what is the major difference between, say, I mean, obviously there's multiple differences from act to and show to show to show and band to band to band and project to project to project. But within like a Psych Furs thing, is it way more about atmosphere? Is it way more about your pedals and your kind of like your
you know, in any situation, it's all about the song. I mean,
it is, yeah.
It's serving the song in whatever context it is, whether it be, you know, an orchestral project or whether it be a electronic album. You know, there's you've always got to think about, I'm always thinking about, okay, for this song, how do I get to where I want to be? You know, and even with doing sessions, it's like, especially now when people send me stuff and, you know, an album to play on, or you know, I've been really lucky that I've had a lot of session stuff coming in. So, which I love. And that was my life prior to, I mean, even when I was with Love Spit Love and the Furs, like I was doing so many sessions, it was hard for me to justify going on the road with anybody.
Right.
Because I was doing well. I mean, I was making so much money. I mean, it was a different time. You can't.
Yeah.
But I've been lucky that people have been hiring me to do all this stuff. So I love it. I love getting a project, listening to it, and thinking, okay, I know what I want to do.
Right.
And going in, pulling out whatever amps I'm going to use, thinking about how I'm going to mic it, thinking about, you know, all that stuff. I love that. It's like,
I know. And I love that.
I'm so into that.
I love that you're passionate in that too, because a lot of people will get like, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, saying no, I mean, this goes in life, but especially within the entertainment business or whatever, because it's, you know, a lot of like, want to lay a project on you. It's so easy just to say no, because it sounds like it's going to be a lot of work. It sounds like it's going to be challenging. But I think it's really, really important to kind of go, especially with your toolbox, because I know when you open your toolbox, it's like your whole toolbox is the whole room, because I can do the orchestral shit, I can play the guitar on this, I can do. Whereas some of us, it's kind of like, well, that's the one thing I do. This screwdriver is what I do. You know, but I think you really have the ability to do almost anything.
It's funny that you say that, because for me, it's really, I had to really discipline myself to say no, because for when I moved to New York, it was like, I'm not going to say no to anything. I don't care if I'm playing for free, I know they're going to hire me back the next time.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I know they're going to, because
that's the right mentality.
Free, you know?
Yeah. That's the right mentality to have in the beginning, of course, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, even now if somebody asked me for a favor, like, you know, somebody I grew up with, or somebody that,
well, that's the whole purpose of this call, actually, is
somebody I played with years ago, you know, and they're like, hey, could you just do it? Yeah, sure, I can, you know.
Sure, yeah.
One thing.
Yeah.
One thing is free, and then,
of course, yeah.
But I really found it hard when I was doing sessions in New York when I got to the point where I was so busy and I was turning down work, and I had to really say, no, I can't do that.
What a great problem to have, though, if you would have been able to tell yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because for the longest time, I was so conditioned to saying yes to everything. And I didn't think, okay, what is this really going to be like? I'm committing to this.
Right.
You know, and you have to, and you think, it's not going to be that big. I can fit that in between this and this, and I could do it, you know. And I was
double and triple booked all the time.
Yes. And I was working, like, you know, I'd play sessions during the day, and then I'd be doing something else at night where I'd be going to, you know, to do for a long time, I worked with Puffy with whatever he's calling himself now, P. Diddy.
Sean Combs, I think we'll call him.
Yes.
That's what his mama called him. That's not
I'd go to his studio at night, and he'd have me working and they wouldn't come in until 2. Right. I'd be booked at midnight, right? And they wouldn't come in till 2 or 3. So I'd sleep during that 2-hour period. My gear was already set up there. So I just, you know, and I did that for like a year, you know? And so I'd be working all day, and then, and like I said, I don't want to say no to anything, because you never know. And this is something that was conditioned in me from a very young age. You never know, like, you're lucky to be working, and you got to take advantage of it now. And I'm still like that in a lot of ways.
And you always feel like you're going to miss out on, that session could have been like the thing that, you know, was really something, you know?
Yeah. I just love doing it. So I don't want to miss out on something. You know?
No. And I think that it really shows, because I think guys like you who really just love it, you know, will sort of like just kind of follow that love, and it will eventually lead to something, you know. I mean, I think that you're a good example of just kind of like follow your passion, and, you know, you'll never work a day in your life, all those kind of cliches, but it's true, you know. So let's, you know, now that we're, you know, I do have to kind of like, you know, there is so much to entertain within the Guns N' Roses thing, because when you came in with that lineup, like I'm such a massive Replacements fan that I nerd out, you know, with the whole with the Tommy thing. I was always like, you know, because, you know, I was such a religious fan about Guns N' Roses in the first place, that when it started to change, there was a little bit of a kind of an awkward kind of like, okay, but then like, Tommy Stinson, really? You know, kind of like, wow, okay, well, I really like this. This is such a cool idea. And, you know, guys like Josh, I mean, come on. I mean, some of the best players in the world have come through that door. So when you come in,
and that's what was really enticing about it, because I wasn't a Guns fan. I mean, I didn't grow up a Gene fan. I mean, just because it wasn't my world. It wasn't where I was at. You know?
I can't imagine it fitting in with what I know you love. I mean, you know, the Appetite band, you know.
But it does when you think about where they came from.
True.
You know, from the Dolls and from Stooges and all the hardcore stuff, you know, Black Flag and, you know, the Dan and stuff like that. That's where I came from.
Yeah.
So it's not that far off. It's just that they had a bent and got put in this category. So I didn't really, you know.
Sunset Strip, Hollywood, hair metal.
Yeah,
category.
It wasn't my
Which it really, honestly, I've had this conversation with so many people about like how Nevermind changed everything. I always felt like Appetite changed everything in a different way. Like there was sort of like this kind of like hair metal thing, and then Guns came along, and it was like, you know, it was pretty jarring, you know, how, at least in my experience of it, when it happened, it was sort of like the next day, everybody had leather jackets and torn up jeans rather than sort of spandex and hairspray, you know, that. And, but you're right. And I think that, you know, I can imagine a guy, you know, like yourself, who was probably already working within session work and session world like that. Were you, I mean, I guess you would have been really young.
I was crazy busy. And then, you know, but it was like Tommy Stinson and Robin Fink and, you know, it was like, oh yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah,
you know, that
it sounds really interesting. Yeah.
And, you know, I saw the Replacements for the first time when I was 14. I saw them opening for X.
Oh, wow. Now that's a bill.
And they were two of my favorite bands at that time.
Absolutely.
And Tommy's my age.
I know. So
Tommy was 14 when I saw him.
So crazy, yeah.
Which I never realized.
And I love Tommy's solo stuff. I know you played on his solo stuff too, which I think those records are really underrated. What was the other band he had on the side? Not on the side, but
Bash and Pop.
Bash and Pop.
Perfect.
Those were great, man. I love that stuff. So a lot of respect, you know, when that went down. So when you came in, who was the lineup officially? I should know this, but it's
actually Josh had just left when I came in. So it was Brain, Bucket, and Robin.
Okay.
And Tommy.
So just guitar. Now let's talk about that, because I've had a couple conversations about this within the world of three guitars. So I was just talking to Phil Campbell the other day from Motorhead. When he joined Motorhead, there was two guitars. Wurzel and him came in. And I remember, and I had a long conversation with him. I don't know if I kept the whole thing, but, you know, just talking about the difference between playing with another guitar player and zero guitar players. You know what I mean? Like, I've always loved that sound of when Jimmy Page goes for a solo live and it's like everything drops out. Some people freak out. Like Slash doesn't really dig that kind of, like, he likes to have a rhythm guitar there to kind of to carry the weight. And I understand that. So within a three guitar world, which I think is interesting because it's not that bizarre, because when you record a record, as you know, and you've made millions of records, is that there's way more than two guitars playing on any given recording generally, as far as overdubs and doubling this and tripling that or whatever. So I would imagine the attack of three guitars can be really effective. And you guys did a really great job of that in the multiple guys that I saw come and go.
With Bucket, I think it was very effective for the reason I mentioned earlier. You know,
he knew when to drop out.
He knew when to drop out, when to come, you know.
That's almost a jazz thing, isn't it? Like, you know, like kind of like jazz guys know when to step out and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
They also sometimes don't know when to step out.
Right. But it's more a musician thing, knowing when just listening to the big picture.
Sure.
And knowing, I mean, Slash is totally dialed in that way. Like, you know, being able to like lay back.
Yeah.
And then you come in and it's, you know, you grow it. You know, it's about the
dynamics. Yeah.
And it's also about the conversation of music, where the focus is at what time, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you know what it's like too, is, you know, for me, when it was punk rock, kids in the garage, it was just like everybody just go like from there's 1, 2, 3, 4 and off we go, and there's no real sort of like step down to the verse, come back up for the chorus, creating the kind of drama that needs to occur.
And in a big way, Nirvana did really influence that.
Which I suppose the Pixies and bands like that probably really
I was going to say the Pixies really...
Yeah, the template of that kind of...
Yes, yeah. That loud, soft, loud.
Which really is a, it feels like a cheap trick now. Ooh, I use the band reference there, but I think that, the idea, like we kind of hand it to those guys, but everybody has known that there's sort of like the chorus is the big, everything kind of comes together in the chorus. But, and I would imagine having that third guitar sort of creates this sort of like, where where you're kind of laying back, or you're playing softer in this part, and then you all come in and just attack that section there.
It should work that way, yeah.
It should, yeah.
It doesn't always.
I always kind of forget because you've been there for so long, you saw DJ come through, you saw Bumblefoot come through. So you saw, and then Frank, which I only recently put together that you and Frank had the long history of like Frank being around since back in the Love Spit Love days. Because I was always kind of like...
Frank was in a band called The Beautiful, and they opened for my old band, Hail Divine.
Okay.
In the Midwest. We were real popular in the Midwest, and they were on a tour, and they did a couple shows with us, and then I ran into Frank. I was writing what would become the first Love Spit Love record with Richard, and I was walking down St. Mark's Place, and he was closing up St. Mark's Leather, and I'm like, hey, I know you, and that's how. And I was like, hey, what's going on with The Beautiful? He's like, oh, we just broke up. And I was like, really? We're looking for a drummer. So from Love Spit Love to The Furs to Honky Toast,
right,
to Pisser. He followed me into Nina.
Right, yeah.
Who else? We've done all that stuff together. So then, I was in Guns, and when Brain was splitting, I was like, hey, I know a guy.
You've got that kind of constant, I know a guy. And Frank's always that guy. That's pretty handy, man. I mean, he seems like such a great dude. Slash is always going to me about like new superhero movies and new stuff. And he goes, Frank's really into that too. I go, oh, really?
Yeah.
Me and Frank can get along great.
Yeah, he's totally into superhero movies.
All that stuff, yeah.
I, on the other hand,
don't understand it. Yeah, it's not for everybody. Yeah. Well, yeah, I know it's not for everybody, but that's that's the beauty of the entertainment world. So when Frank comes into but that there's still a chapter before that, because by the time Frank comes into the band, I'm trying to think how that all works. So Dizzy's been there the whole time. Dizzy's been around the entire time, and then slowly that version, which in a funny way feels like now the quintessential version of the Chinese Democracy, is DJ and Ron.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. But
I just think only because it just became so, the Vegas residency, that kind of stuff.
But to me, most of that record was done with Robin and Bucket.
True. True. Yeah.
Though Ron did play on some stuff. I don't think DJ played on anything.
No, I don't think he played on it. But it's so funny because when I listen to that record now, I can hear Bucket when he comes in. You're like, that's Buckethead. Yeah. Yeah,
he's a very forceful player.
Very.
And he's very, his presence is very strong. And and I loved playing with him.
Yeah, he's a monster.
Robin too. Robin's a phenomenal talent.
A very underrated guitar player. People don't really think about that. In Nine Inch Nails, it was always like, when I think about Nine Inch Nails, my favorite version was that the Downward Spiral with Robin.
Yeah, but he wasn't recording with them. I mean,
no, he wasn't on the records.
It's always been Trent playing. Of course, so you don't see the genius of Robin.
No, not at all. That's what was so interesting to watch it. Kind of like when they, when Robin's in Guns N' Roses, you go, Robin Fink, because I'd seen the band live, and I go, even that was more of a tacky, atmospheric. It wasn't guitar solos and all that kind of stuff. So I was really impressed to see him be able to kind of stretch out that way. And but it's such an interesting choice of musicians anyway, because nothing about any of the decisions of the players that have come and gone have ever really been based on like, I'm just kind of happy it didn't go like, I don't know, just generic guitar wankery.
Yeah
Yeah, it was all very interesting choices, at least I thought. But again, so the 3 guitar player thing, and I always kind of felt like, so your role essentially was kind of like, you should kind of be, I mean, being that rock solid, you know, I think every band needs that kind of, the bass player and the drummer are obviously that thing. But if you don't have that other guitar player who's locked into the situation as well, the Izzy factor, if you will,
Right.
which, you know, we always talk about that lost, or not lost, but that sort of that X factor of like, when you listen
the
to
Malcolm factor.
the
Yeah,
Malcolm,
that,
100% Malcolm factor.
Yeah.
Or Keith Richards factor, you know, there's some,
right.
there's this pocket going on that is so important that it's, if you don't pay attention to it, it's
it
not
is
there.
sort of a lost art. I mean, but
Yeah.
it is a real art. And that's something that I'm totally okay with diving into,
yeah,
and living in that space.
Yeah.
You know, fortunately it's freer in our situation where Slash is really gracious with you know, letting me play. And but yeah, I love that, being that guy. I love that, the art of Malcolm, you know, that's and Keith. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's Keith and Malcolm to me that really sort of have the template for that whole thing.
As I get older, I think I've always been attracted to that Pete Townsend, that kind of like, that sort of like, well, I mean, in the Who's world, when you listen to the Who, he's really like, everything else is insanity, and Pete Townsend just kind of holding it together. But that ability to kind of like just lock in, and people like, we will always kind of be distracted by, in AC/DC, looking at the guy in the school uniform running around like a maniac. But you realize, when I would watch AC/DC as an adult, I would sit there and I would just look at that wall of those 3 guys in the back, Cliff, Phil, and Malcolm. I go, I would just be like, no one can touch these guys. No one can. I mean, everybody thinks it's a lot more simple than it is, but there's a real art to locking that together.
Absolutely.
And it's a never-ending treasure to kind of dig through that and figure, how can we lock this in? I used to love talking to Duff about how him and Steven, before they recorded Appetite, would just rehearse together, the 2 of them. So when you get those digga-dan-dan, digga-dan-dan, digga-digga, you know, all these kind of like shots and stuff that they would do together. And Fitz and I are both religious about, when we're doing a Guns song, it's like, well, let's make sure we do it right, you know, and not kind of like create our own weird version of it. It's like, let's do it correctly, you know.
Frank and Duff spent a lot of time rehearsing, just the 2 of them. I mean, that's because you know, Duff was a drummer, so he comes from that. He wants it to be. Well, he knows it. Wants it. He knows exactly what he wants. Yeah.
I was going to ask you that. So when you came, when the reunion happens, how much objectively to you, because you're in the unique position of being like, having been in the Democracy version and this, how much was there of an adjustment as far as like the rehearsal aspect of kind of like readdressing? Because I think about it a lot, say, with Kiss, when Ace Frehley came back at that point, there apparently was a bit of like, you know, okay, well, having to kind of remind guys of how things went, or sometimes the guy from the past thing is reminding the new guys how things went. And it can be both ways, you know what I mean? Like, because luckily for Slash, he'd been playing a lot of the Guns material with us in terms of like, he had not played it in Snake Pit or anything like that. He hadn't played it in like 10 years or something like that. I don't remember. But we started playing with us, and it was sort of like, he was very particular about, you know, which version to pay attention to. Like, he loved the Appetite stuff. He didn't seem to be as keen to the Use Your Illusion stuff, but I don't think it was necessarily as keen to, as much as the instrumentation on the Use Your Illusion stuff was a little bit more like, oh, there's some keyboards, there's some, you know, bigger production type things. But when those guys come into rehearsal, how much woodshedding is there involved in that?
Well, I mean, you know very well how much.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Because our boy loves to play.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
I can tell you stories, man. It's like, I'll never forget one time Slash coming home from you guys, I think. He's coming home from South Africa, and he goes, "Hey man, do you want to get together and jam?" He just sent me a text, and I go, "Yeah, okay, sure." And he goes, "How about Saturday?" And I go, "Okay, cool." And then I kind of just, I look in the tour dates, and I go, he's literally coming home from South Africa, and he wants to go rehearse. Like, he's nuts. He just wants to play all the time. Yeah.
He wants to play all the time.
Yeah.
So he wants to play, you know, he wants to do, and as you know, and I love this about both him and Duff, their work ethic is like
bananas.
Okay, They come in, we hang out, chat, and then once he puts on the guitar, it doesn't come off.
It doesn't come off. There's not really breaks. No.
And I love that. I love
me too.
that. Like it's like, okay, we're here to work. Let's go.
Yeah.
And it's just playing whether or not we're just fucking around and just jamming, or it's, you know, we're running through the set, or we're working out a new, you know, thing. I love that. I love to, because I think his whole thing is that he wants it to be muscle memory. He wants to not have to think about anything when he's on stage.
No.
And I'm this exact same way. And it doesn't matter how much you sit in your bedroom and practice.
No.
It's different than when you're in a room and you're, you know, locking in with somebody live, and you've got to get that tight, you know, and then you got to do it over and over and over again. And then it's a whole, you know, Tommy Stinson's whole approach was he hated rehearsing, because he was like, it doesn't matter, because once we get on stage, it's a totally different muscle group.
It does. It totally changes.
Muscle group that has nothing to do with rehearsing.
Yeah. He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. No. But I like Slash's approach of playing it to death in rehearsal, to where you're thinking about what you're gonna have for dinner, not what.
I've been guilty of that. I've been guilty of
right?
that.
Yeah. You're not thinking, and that's great. You don't want to be thinking about what part's coming up next. You want it to be just muscle memory, so that it's there and you don't have to even think about it. And that's the best.
Slash once said to me, and I don't know if he's ever said this to you, but he goes, you know, we were just at a long rehearsal, and that's what I was going to say about this. I remember, like, when back in that time when he was coming in from South Africa or Australia or something like that, and I go, oh, this will be easy, because he loves to rehearse. We'll rehearse 6 hours easy, you know, playing on your feet, you know, rocking out. And I remember thinking mentally, I went into that rehearsal thinking, like, this will be easy. He'll be jet lagged. It'll be, you know, and it was like an 8-hour. It was like nuts. It was like, and I was like, so I've never taken that for granted. Now I know every time I go in, it's like, you better be training before you're going to go jam with him.
That's right.
He said to me once, he goes, well, astronauts, you know, with astronauts, they have to kind of like go through this whole process. You know, it's a whole thing, training before they go into space. And I go, and that's what he was equating getting on stage as, is like, yeah, like Tommy's, I kind of more lean in the Tommy way of like, we know the parts, we know the changes, boom, let's go play a show. Because by show 2, it's locked in and you're ready to go. Where Slash is like, no, we need to be locked in for show 1, you know, and ready to go. And both versions are absolutely correct, and I think I'm somewhere in the middle, really, you know, between like let's I don't want to rehearse the life out of anything. I don't think that really happens, because we often, I don't know about you guys, well, you must rehearse a lot without Axl, because we rehearse the shit out of it before Miles is even there, and he wants to be able to like not rely upon, because it's very easy to rely on the singer has stopped singing here, so this is the reintro or whatever it is. So then when the singer comes in, we're already like, we already got our black belt.
Yeah, we do the same thing.
Yeah, and that's very, very, very normal.
And it starts off with Duff and Frank. It's just the two of them, and they get it so that they're tight, and then we'll come in, you know, and then, you know, the keyboards come in after, you know.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of instrumentation, and in some ways, I would imagine with a show of that size and with screens and stuff going on, is there rehearsals that involve that? I've never even asked that of the guys before, but I would assume they'll that world.
Yeah, production rehearsals.
Yeah, we are way more punk rock in our world, where it's like we've entertained that a couple times, and Slash has been like, nah, just sort of like, you just doesn't want to deal with that. In Guns, it's like a whole other animal, but in our world, it's like, nah, let's just play rock and roll. Okay.
Yeah, we have to for the crew. It's those rehearsals are for the, and it's all about the crew. It's not really about us.
No, that's totally understandable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's next? I don't want to keep you for too much longer, because I know it's getting on, but I know there's new Guns music at some point. I don't want to get into the particulars of all that, although it would be amazing. I know that's very exciting, and you know, I'm one of those guys that's like, I always know, like, you know, the guys talk about it, but they don't talk about it in terms of, you know, on this date and on this and this many songs. I'm kind of like, I'm kind of more like, as a fan, to be honest, I'm just more excited to hear it when it's ready.
But you know how it's all very, I mean, with Guns, it's all very secretive. It's all we're not real public. I mean, those guys especially, like, you know, you know, they're like, we don't talk about what, it's like that when it happens, you know, it's.
And I'm kind of that way too. Like, I don't want to know like who's in this upcoming movie, like who's been cast until I need to know, you know. It's kind of like when you know that kind of stuff way early, you're like, oh, okay.
You know, I miss that
mystery aspect.
Yeah. And you know, that's what I love about like AC/DC still maintains that. The Stones still maintain that. 100%. And I think that's great, just because that's where they come. It's like, I don't, the thought of me posting and of like my kid's birthday, or, you know, like,
I know,
I know. My personal life is my personal life.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And that's why I think being in St. Louis and not stuck in Hollywood or something like that is a totally different experience. Now,
well, I mean, a lot of people have to do that, you know, because that's sort of how the world works, you know. Now, you know, but I'm lucky that I don't have to do it, because it's not in me, you know, to be public in that way.
It's for me, it's like, you know, I do have to play that game to some degree, only in terms of trying to keep your little cottage industry going as well, you know, as beyond everything else you have going on. But it's none of it's natural, especially for guys fucking, you know, in my 50s now, just like I just don't want to have to play this, you know, this game anymore. But I think when it comes to music and all that kind of stuff, like yourself, as excited as I am about music and as excited about, like, you know, all that kind of stuff, it's fun to connect with people. And I think that this has created a whole new medium of being able to connect with other people as excited as we are, you know what I mean? So what is
Axel's always been that way, where he's always been, man, it's all about the music. It's just about the music. If you like, I've never known anybody or worked with anybody with as much integrity as that cat. Like, because it's all about the music, and that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
Like, I just think that's rad. I love
it's rad, and it's rare, because it's, you know, as you get,
like I said, I've never seen it in anybody, not to that degree.
And in this business, where regardless of how much you love music, it does turn into business. It does turn into, like, you know, this year's revenue versus, you know, blah 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 blah. And you're like, where guys like me, I don't want to think about that kind of stuff. I just want to play music. You know what I mean?
He will not. He won't. Yeah. I remember him saying to me once, I never do something just for money, because every time I do, it goes wrong. And I remember him saying that to Doc McGee, and I remember smoke coming out of Doc's ears. Like,
I was gonna say, that's not how Doc's wired at all.
Not do something for money, like trying to understand.
That's the beauty of not having to, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's, and I think we all play that game, even like as session musicians or anything else, or in a side guy position. There's gigs that you'll do for money, but it's sort of like, it doesn't mean you're going to do it for money and it's a drag, or it's a money and you're going to give a piece of your soul away.
It's funny, because like, I remember people bagging on Slash for doing certain gigs and stuff, but man, I've done some highly questionable gigs or albums, you know, but I never think about it that way. Like, oh, this is going to look bad. Like, it's like, I'm going to get to play with this guy, and I'm going to play with this guy. And like, I've always wanted to work with those guys. This is going to be, you know, and it's more for me, like, if I'm doing a tour with Rihanna, it's like, I get to play with Eric Smith on bass, you know, like I get to play with, you know, and I love that. Like, because you're always going to walk away a better musician, you know?
And it clearly hasn't affected you negatively in any way. You know, your career is just fine. It's not like, you know,
I've been lucky. I mean, I know that, but I've been fortunate in that people are understand that. I'm working with guys that understand that.
But that's the thing. When you look at your resume is dizzying. Like, to look at it, I'm like, oh my God. It's like, I didn't forget about, because I saw you with Thin Lizzy, and I was like, dude, I totally remember seeing you with Thin Lizzy and going like, man, that must be such a trip getting to go play those songs with,
oh my God, that was so much fun.
Dude, I can't imagine.
So we played with you guys. We played with you guys in London.
High Voltage or something like that. Yeah, that was great, man. That was really great, and really great to watch you. And again, knowing that you were playing this, not, you know, just your Richard Fortus version. You were like, you know, I'm going to play these parts correctly, and we were blown away, man.
Man, playing that, when I was a kid, Live and Dangerous really sort of formed my ideals of what the perfect guitar tone was, you know?
Especially those two guitar players working together kind of thing.
The guitar harmonies. Man, I remember saying to Scott, I told Scott that. I was like, man, that album really, I realized sitting down and learning these songs, every note, how much that really affected my perception of what the perfect guitar tone was. And he was like, really? It's like, man, I'm sorry. He's like, I hate to burst your bubble, kid, but we just bought what we could afford. You know, we couldn't afford the new Marshalls, so you know our Marshalls were a couple years older. Of course they were. They were Plexis. You know.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you know, Brian had, you know, Robbo had his TS9, and he had an Echoplex, and Scott got the phase shifter. You know, like that.
Wow.
Those were their pedals. Like, you know.
First wave of those pedals and amps too. Like it's not like,
and they just that was what they had, and they made the most of it. You know?
But I mean, we all at the time, those were just what they had, and we all want that stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
well, now we do. Yeah.
At the time, they were just kind of like, it's an old Marshall. It's like 3 years old. 3 years old. It's like, you know, we all want that model. You know what I mean? Yeah, it was such great. I mean, and I kind of forgot about not forgot, but again, like your stint through the Daisies with, I guess Frank and Dizzy were in that as well, right?
Frank came in. That was an interesting situation with Frank. He was only in it for a very short while. We came into New York, and our drummer that we had booked this session time. We were on tour, but we had like 3 days off, and we were going to go in and record this EP. And the drummer was supposed to be setting up. The manager calls me and said, "Know any drummers?" It's like,
and you're all like, was that what they think? I know a guy. Frank. Frank is the guy.
We were in New York. So I was like, I'd call 6 drummers right now. And, you know, and I called Frank, and Frank was like, I'll be down. I can be there in 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So he did the record with us, which was great. That EP is, I love.
That's great. Yeah. It's so great.
But, and Marco had played with me in Thin Lizzy.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
And I did that when we did one tour with Charlie Drayton, who's one of my favorite musicians of all time.
I was just talking about Charlie the other day. He's one of my favorite drummers, and he's not even really technically a drummer. It's like, he's kind of,
he started out as a drummer.
He did. Okay, yeah.
When he was a kid, he was like a 14-year-old kid, and was a prodigious drummer. I mean, phenomenal drummer at a young age. And then got bored with drums and started playing bass, you know.
And nailed that too, yeah.
With Steve Jordan and that whole expensive.
I saw that. It's still one of my top 3 shows of all time.
I saw him too. I saw him in Chicago.
It was mind blowing. And it's actually, it's what's weird to say is that when I talk about my favorite songs on those records, it's like, well, that's Charlie on drums. I go, I knew it. I could just tell, because Jordan is one of my all-time favorite drummers too. But I always go, there's something about Charlie's pocket that's just so gnarly.
Yes, I haven't played with both those guys. I mean, when you play with Charlie Drayton, when you hear a record, like you said, instantly you can tell that's Charlie. You know,
yeah, he's
just
badass.
The most unique drummer.
He really is.
Anytime I get to play with him, I do it no matter what, because I know I'm gonna walk away a better musician. You know,
absolutely.
And that we did a tour with the Daisies with Charlie and Daryl Jones playing bass.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah. Wow,
that was
a lineup. Yeah. That's crazy. I'm so jealous of your New York chapter, because it's one of those places that still to this day when I go to New York, I just go, I get it. Like I understand the energy of that place and all the things going on. I mean, I think I've always been a bit too conservative, just as far as like, I don't know if I'm really ready to throw all in on a town like this because of, you know, whatever I got going on. But I get it every time I'm there. I would love to have had that experience. The subway and the living in Manhattan or wherever. Were you in Manhattan? I don't know where.
The whole time, yeah. Wow. I just sold my apartment.
Really?
This year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Whereabouts was your place?
Lower East Side.
Awesome.
In Grand and Clinton.
The best.
So, you know, I feel more at home than anywhere else in New York. Like when I first got to New York, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an outsider. Like growing up in St. Louis, I always felt like like I didn't belong there. You know, I couldn't wait to get to New York. And New York was my father was from New York. You know, my daughter
really?
was born in New York.
There you go.
Actually, my father's Canadian. He's from Montreal.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's why I like you. Just kidding.
Yeah. And then at 15, moved to New York, and yeah.
Crazy. What a story, huh?
And came to St. Louis with St. Louis music.
Right. That's so crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's a really cool story. Like you say, when you're a kid in a place like St. Louis or where I come from, you can't wait to get out of there because you're such an oddball as far as, you know, being a rock and roller or whatever you're into. And then, but to return to it, I think is a really, like your story and to be back there now, I just think there's a certain amount of romanticism that I have about, like, you know, and then I go back home and it's like, everything's familiar and cozy, and your kids are like growing up in the same neighborhood. I think that's really awesome.
You know, what's funny, it doesn't feel familiar and cozy to me. It feels, I don't know how to describe it, but it's very insular. You know, I have, because when I'm home, and I don't go out and see bands a lot. You know, I don't know. My band from here was really popular here and really left a big mark on St. Louis.
That's great.
And is sort of mythical in a way, you know, like people, like, I don't know. So it's not, I don't go out a whole lot, but there's, you know, it's like a small, big city.
But it says a lot about the music industry in the 21st century. And I talk about this a lot because during COVID, it's really messed up a lot of, like, well, let's just get together to jam. Like, no one lives in the same house like the Beatles and Help. You know what I mean? It's like, it just doesn't happen. And now you've got, like, you know, in your case, you know, where some guys are in LA, some guys you're in St. Louis. As long as you have an international airport, you can live pretty much anywhere on the planet. As long as it's kind of like, you know, okay, well, we're going to rehearse next month on these dates. Okay, I'll see you there, kind of thing. It's very rare these days to have everybody living, you know, in the same town.
It worked out well with the Furs when we did the new album. I produced the new Furs album.
That's so cool.
And we recorded it here because one guy was in Chicago, one guy was in DC, one guy's in New York, one guy's in Tennessee, one guy's in LA or in the desert. And so it was central. So everyone came here. And
so they actually came there. It wasn't like one of those remote recordings where people were sending stuff around.
No. Everyone came here. No, we were all in a studio here. And then we did vocals and overdubs here.
Because we do live in a day and age where a lot of amazing things, if you and I decided right now, which I'd like to announce right now, we're going to do this. Just kidding. But if we decided right now, we're going to make a project, send me over your files and I'll do whatever. And we send, you know what I mean? Like, it's like Frank's playing drums. Where is Frank? Is he in New York still?
He's in the desert. He's in...
we probably shouldn't disclose that.
Palm Springs
area 51. No, okay, yeah.
That's around where he is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great. But I mean, like, you know, guys can do stuff, and it's been happening all the time. More now during COVID than ever before. But it has been happening where entire records are being made remotely. You know, it's been
that way for a while. I mean, there are very few albums that are made with everybody in the same room now. I mean, you know, and all the sessions that I do, you know, for the last 10 years, most of the sessions that I do, probably 90% of them I do here. And, you know, people send me tracks, you know, whether it be bass and drums, and then I'll, you know, it's great because I've got all my gear here. I've got all my amps, all my guitars, so all my vintage pedals and everything, you know, and I've got a good selection of mic pre's and microphones. So it's super easy.
I think it's dope that you're using your proper amps too, like in a day and age where, to be honest, a lot of us are not using real amps anymore. You are I mean, we could spend like another hour talking about gear now, but I know that, you know, because when it comes to like amps, you've always got your shit dialed in. We've had a lot of conversations about, I wonder if I have any around here, because my signature model is a reverse headstock, just like you love. I'm going to get you one, dude. I'm going to get you one because
I like that body style a lot.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I told you before, I think you did a great job with
it. Thank you. It's, you know, I like I say, I've been a nerd my whole life, like just like staring at guitars and bodies, and, you know, and it's just what I love, you know, and like you, I think that, you know, when I hear you talk about, you're so much deeper into it than me as far as the string retention, and I'm kind of like, I just thought it looked rad, you know, and I just love the way it plays, but But yeah, no, I think that's a whole other thing, because you're one of those guys that's, you know what you're doing as far as like how you want your pickups, how you want the amp to, the speakers in your and all that. And I really dig that, because I'm like, we live in a day and age where that, like many other things we've talked about today, are becoming a lost art, because you can just call it up on a box, and here's my plexi, and here's my twin reverb, and here's
that simple.
it never quite is it? No, but everybody tries to sell me down that road.
Super geeky with that stuff.
I know, but you have to be. I mean, again, it's your passion. It's your passion is whether it's songs or instrumentation and gear. I really dig that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, we've Slash and I talked about it. Like, I don't know that it makes any difference to the person, the back of the stadium.
Especially when they're listening to their music on something like this,
Well, there's that too. But I mean, even in a live environment, we spend so much time and, trying to get the exact, but it's not about them.
No,
it's about me.
Yeah. Well, I've watched Slash come up.
Yeah. But it's because we want to be, it's because we hear that little 1%,
Oh, absolutely.
And if it's not there, we miss it. And we need that to inspire us, right?
I've watched Slash, like I've walked off stage and been like, dude, that crowd was one of the best, it's one of the best shows we've ever played. This crowd was insane. And he'll be like, I had a weird night. And I'm like, why? He goes, my tone was weird. And I was like, and I just thought, like, because to me, my whole world is like the audience and the entire vibe. And him as a guitar player, he can tend to get really insular and really,
I relate to him so much. It's scary.
Yeah. It's like, I've watched him walk on stage just at soundcheck, put on his guitar and go, gank, and go, like, and just like hone in on like, where's the microphone? And he just knows immediately, like, something's not right.
I do the same thing. I'm like, I check the microphone placement,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
You guys exhaust your guitar techs.
and the monitor guys, and they're all like, oh, you got to be kidding me! Like,
you noticed that? Yeah. That's great though, because you got like those, eagle, those hockey ears, just like what's going on all the time.
Especially with in-ears.
Yeah.
Because you're listening under a microscope, right? Everything is like super exposed, so you notice the slightest change.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, isn't it? Being like, so hyper focused on things like that, but it's when you're I don't know, like a sous chef, it's like you're not going to go in there with a dull knife, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Well, they won't know the difference. It's like,
it's not about them. No,
it's not about them. That's right. If there's anything to walk away from this today, it's like, it's really about us. It really doesn't.
Right. That's right. It's all about. In fact, that should be the name of our album.
Yeah. Us. It's just called Us. Is that because you guys? Is it like you're so united with? No, it's just because we made the record for us, and we don't really care what anybody thinks.
It's
which in reality is most of the best music on the world is made because somebody just wanted to make some great music. They don't really care.
Absolutely.
And that's
absolutely.
It's always that time when you're thinking to yourself, let's make a record that the kids are gonna like, that it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Which goes back to what Axl was talking about. Like, doing anything other than for yourself is sort of pointless, really.
Yep.
But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Man, it's so great to catch up with you. This was so much fun.
Man. We should do this. We should do this on a regular basis. We don't have to record it every time. But exactly. We'll do a weekly Richard Fortus check-in. It's just check how long your hair's getting, because you're starting to become.
I know. It's not about. It's just about us.
Exactly. Eventually, it will be about like
nobody else would enjoy it, but you and I.
Yeah, exactly. How far is that microphone from your Celestian? Let's take a look.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see whatever whenever we get to finally cross paths, will be very exciting.
Hopefully it will be sooner than later, but
I have a feeling. I'm the optimistic guy. If you would have told me it'd be December and we still haven't played a show, I would have said you're crazy, but here we are. But I'm still kind of the optimistic guy, going like, it's going to be fine, everybody. It's going to be fine. So I really think 2021 is going to be nuts. I think we're all going to be, it's going to be crazy. So
yeah, I hope
in a good way.
All right, man. Good.
All right, man. You too. Big love. Take care. Say hi to the family for me. All right.
I will. You too. Take care.
Peace.